This is Ari Koretsky, and welcome to Jews You Should Know, introducing the broader community to interesting and inspiring Jewish men and women making a difference in our world. Some are already famous, some not yet so, but each is a Jew you should know.
And we are back with another fabulous episode of Jews You Should Know. This week I was debating which episode to release. And I realized, we're coming up on Rosh Hashanah and the high holiday period. It's a time of redemption, it's a time of renewal, it's a time of repentance and return in the Jewish religion. For those, of course, listening at the time of this release or close to it. And so I thought, are there any episodes that reflect on those themes? And when I looked down the list of those that I've already recorded that are awaiting release, I realized that one stood out more than any other, and that was my conversation with Yechezkel Stelzer. Yechezkel Stelzer has done a really wide variety of interesting things over his career. He himself is someone that did not grow up observant and is a chozer b'tshuva, someone who returned to Judaism later in life. And he's held a wide variety of roles, run different organizations, lots of projects aimed at bringing other Jews back, including something called Jacob Rupp, a massive television station, and other projects. But most recently, he's been the director of Guard Your Eyes. Guard Your Eyes is a website and really a community online that helps people, mostly men, young men, but people of all ages, and women as well, deal with internet addiction, pornography addiction, and all of the attendant challenges that come along with it. Now, this is, of course, an issue that exists in any population and really across the world, but is particularly sensitive in a Jewish community and in a religious Jewish context, whereby there are added layers of perhaps stigma, certainly obligations and prescriptions governing behavior and the ethics around sexual activity and all which goes with that. This is definitely a more sensitive topic in terms of the maturity level of the content that I'm used to putting out, and I hope that if anyone has children listening, you will be forewarned ahead of time that there are some explicit parts here, and especially in the second half of the interview, it's a pretty open conversation. I also want to note that in general, because of the way the conversation flowed, there was a little bit more Hebrew than usual. Some of the terms that I normally like to make sure are translated and concepts explained that might be less familiar to somebody not overly familiar with the rhythms or vocabulary of observant Jewish communities would still be able to understand. But the way that this conversation went, I just wasn't able at every moment to ensure that everything was translated or explained fully. So I think you'll get the idea no matter what, but there might be a couple of phrases or words that are unfamiliar if you're not used to them. With all of that background and all of those disclaimers, I do hope you'll listen carefully to this conversation. It's really interesting. It's a unique and different sort of window into the Jewish community that many people, many listeners may not have had access to before. And it touches on a lot of, again, sensitive and very contemporary topics. It might elicit strong reactions one way or the other, and that's fine, that's great. But I think you'll sense a really passionate and committed approach to addressing very real issues, very raw issues in the Jewish world. A reminder, as always, to follow us on social media at Jews You Should Know, spelled out fully on Instagram and Facebook. Jews You Should Know with the letter U on Twitter. Subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you might be listening. Please let your friends know as well. We're always looking for more listenership, which happens mostly through word of mouth and through your spreading the word. And now to our conversation with Guard Your Eyes director, among a host of other titles and fascinating professional accolades, Yechezkel Stelzer. We are here with Yechezkel Stelzer, the director of Guard Your Eyes, which is a really, really unique online organization dealing with some of the most sensitive issues when it comes to internet addiction, pornography, and all kinds of struggles that people have with the modern world and the unique era in which we live. How are you, Yechezkel?
Great, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining, and I know you're coming to us from the Holy Land, right outside Jerusalem, I believe, in a town called Telstone. I see you like Z's. You got Stelzer, Telstone. So a great place that I love to look at from the highway as I drive by. I don't stop there often, but I did have a Pesach Seder there in 1997. That was quite memorable. So at the Bleiweiss family, if you know Menashe Bleiweiss.
Yeah, sure. Very
but
nice.
in any event, so where are you from, Yechezkel? Take us back to kind of your upbringing, and were you born in Israel? Did you grow up there, or where are you from exactly?
I was born in Argentina, 1971. I'm 48 years old. My parents made Aliyah in 1976 when I was 5. My parents, the brother and sister, and me. We moved we were in Merkaz Klita, in an absorption center in Mevaseret Zion, not far from where I live.
I went to yeshiva in Mevaseret, so that's great.
Very nice. And then half a year later, we moved to Gilo, and then to central Jerusalem. I went to school in the Gymnasia, in a secular school. And when I was about 13, we moved to Canada. We stopped in England a little bit. I learned their English from watching television a bit and hanging out in rugby stadiums. And then we went to Winnipeg, Canada, Winnipeg. I was there for high school, went to University in Montreal, McGill, came back for the army in Israel. Came back for a 1-year program in Israel, 91, 92. Finished my degree in Montreal, came back for the army, volunteered for the IDF. I was a research officer in the behavioral science department. I dealt with suicides in the army and manpower selection interviews, psychological interviews for officers who wanted to work for the army. And then I went to England. I studied in London School of Economics for my master's in development studies, came back to Israel, and I've been living most ever since. Besides, I went on Shlichus for Eshet Torah once to Flatbush in 2000 for Project Sleeping Giant, or Project Inspired, before it started. And then most of my life I've been otherwise in Israel.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. So going back to the Argentina, I guess was it Buenos Aires, or that's the only city I know. So
yeah, Buenos Aires. That's
okay. Then I was successful. Great. So how long was your family there? Were there generations there? Or I know a lot of survivors ended up there. What was the origin of your family there?
So it's an interesting story. Okay, so I'll tell you. My from one side, my father's side, they came from Poland, from Galicia. They're a family of 13 children. About 7, 8 of them made it to Argentina before the Second World War, in the late 20s, early 30s, and the other half of the family died running away or in camps, or and they didn't make it. So my grandfather, grandfather Yitzchak was with his brother Chaim were the first two who came, and then they brought the other brothers and sisters from Europe, one at a time or two at a time. And they were Shomer Shabbos. They established a shul in Buenos Aires, and got married. They had 2 kids, my father and his sister. My father was actually also was in the part of the fold till he was about 15. He went to med school when he was 15, graduated as a psychiatrist at age 21, and then he became more involved with leftist, both therapeutically Freudian type of psychiatry, and also as far as politically with the left. And that's part of the reason we had to leave Argentina, because the military regime there, my father had got a little bit into trouble with them, and people were disappearing, if you remember, in the 70s. And we had to run away from Argentina. My grandfather was closer to kept still Shabbos, like I said. He told my father, if you go to Israel, I'll come after you. My father didn't have such an affiliation for Israel or for Yiddishkeit, but I said, okay, fine, we'll try it. Went to the Sochnut, they gave him a free ticket. He said, we'll go try Israel. My grandfather never came to Israel, but that's how we made it, thanks to my Saba Yitzchak. From my other side of the family, my mother's side, my grandfather came from Russia, from the Russian-Romanian border, I think, in 1905 with the colonies of Baron Hirsch In 1905, he made it. I think it was just a Iran child. Both my grandmothers on both sides were born in Argentina, but I think originally they were both either from Russian or Polish sort of descent. And that part of there's more to the story of my grandfather. It's like, if we'll have time to. Part of my tshuva story has to do with him more specifically, but you lead the show wherever you want to go.
Your family eventually made Aliyah, and was there any particular impetus for that? And then ultimately, why did they leave? It sounds like they were there for a short time and then went to back to the unpromised land, and particularly a very cold unpromised land in Winnipeg.
Right. So why they made Aliyah? Like I said, like it was like it was a time to leave because there was danger. My cousins, actually, I have cousins that were young Zionist activists in Argentina, were arrested. There was a time like a little bit like in the Iron Curtain types of regimes where they were arresting Jews for activism this or activism that, and my cousins were arrested. They were also being arrested was very dangerous. People would get arrested and then disappear, and they would find them. They found them years later in like mass graves under a stadium in downtown Buenos Aires, and it was a dangerous time. People, once you disappeared, you didn't know where you were taken. They said they would throw them off helicopters over the ocean, and it was a pretty scary time in Argentina. So it just seemed like it was my father's acquaintances, colleagues, or apparently someone that were disappearing, and it felt like it was getting tighter and closer. My father, like they hid some activists in their house. Also, it felt like it was getting too much heat, and they had to get out. So it's either my father had a preference to go to Spain. He knew the language, professionally be better. But like I said, thanks to my grandfather, we made to Israel. Why we left Israel? It wasn't supposed to be. It was like my father's like I said, psychiatrist. He was interested in sabbatical. They have this concept in the academic world and medical world to take sabbaticals. And Israel is a small country. People, in those days, they like to travel a lot. And going on a sabbatical was the thing to do when you're in either a professor or a doctor in a hospital. So he did a sabbatical. He got a sabbatical in Winnipeg. And they say in Hebrew, he only meant to go for a year or two just for that sabbatical. And they're
Famous
still
last words.
they're sitting in Israel. There's that saying. It's called Yoshvim ala mizvadot. We're still sitting on the suitcases. We didn't unpack. So they sat on the mizvadot for 20, 30 years until they're sort of still based there now for medical reasons. They're back in Jerusalem but really they stayed there. And why they moved, it is a comfortable life professionally. And for psychiatrists, Winnipeg, Canada is a very comfortable environment because there's like Medicare, which means that there's endless lines of clients, and you don't have to, and if the government pays for any treatments they want. So there's endless amount of work, and it's very rewarding to be able to help so many people. So he just found it very comfortable professionally in Canada, and that's where he stayed.
So what eventually brought you back? You mentioned you had your own kind of religious revival, and also that you came on a gap year and eventually did the army. What was your story?
91, the goal for. So I left Israel like in my teenage years. It was 13, 14. And I came back one summer to be with my friends. I thought I was going to stay. I felt like it was it wasn't so amazing to move to Winnipeg for many reasons. The first day I came there, I was like, there were swastikas all over the school. It was set at a Nazi school. I don't know if that was dafka, like for a welcoming for me or not, but it's definitely a sign that stayed with me for a while. It wasn't the easiest move to Winnipeg as a teenager. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad. Some nice things about it. Skiing was good, and I made some good friends, but it was quite a change. And so however is that, and I to go back to Israel. And in 91 was the goal for all my childhood friends were in the army. And from an Israeli kid, that everyone's in the army and there's fighting and there's going to be a war and people are going to be heroes and you can really make a difference. I always had that sort of like very idealistic part in me. And, having a big war and all my friends there and it made me feel like I'm really out of it. I'm in the wrong place in the wrong time and I got to be back. And I figured I got to go back and I wasn't ready to just like pack everything and just leave, but I made the move to start moving back. I went back a few months later. I went to university there a few months later. The war was over by the time I got there. But I felt very strong. I got to come back. And so I just went to finish my degree because I wasn't going to leave without the degree another year. And then I came back and volunteered for the army, and I decided that's where I was going to stay. That was pretty much it.
So tell me about your religious renaissance, so to speak.
Okay. So that's I'll have to find the public version to
No. We want the private version.
I don't know. It's a little bit private. But okay, I'll tell you. So I've always
just the two of us, Yechezkel. Just the two of us.
So let's see what I could tell you. So I've always had this, with my grandfather being, Shomer Shabbos, and my father sort of breaking away. And growing up in Israel, actually, it was quite a anti-religious sort of environment where I was. I remember in my young ages, there was there was these demonstrations against the Haredim, that they wanted to shut down the movie theaters in downtown Jerusalem. And that was the spirit that I grew up in, very secular gymnasia, anti-religious sort of environment. But somehow, because of my grandfather, used to come every year for the high holidays, and he used to buy seats in the great synagogue on King George and used to take me. I always had a warm place for tradition and for Yiddishkeit. I wasn't a big believer. I thought it was a nice thing that, from the old country, people do nice things that don't make too much sense, but it's a nice thing. And so I had a nice bar mitzvah. I wanted to do a bar mitzvah. I did with my grandfather came. We did a bar mitzvah at the wall with Aliyah Torah, bigger than my wedding. We did a bar mitzvah in the Renaissance at the entrance of town. My grandfather paid for, and it was I always had this. And when my grandfather passed away, must have been about. I'll go back. Sorry, I always had a back and forth, and it was really I had this question. Who am I? What am I? Am I Israeli? Am I Jewish? Should I go back to Israel? Why should I go back to Israel? Is there any sense to this religion or not? Should I be a bigger part of it? And when I came back to Israel, 91, 92, I did get a little more exposure, and I was more open. I had to go all the way to Canada and come back as a Canadian to be able to learn a little Yiddishkeit, because in Israel, growing up Jerusalem was the wall between secular and religion and religious people was very, very high. It was it was very anti-environment. But coming back to the one-year program as a Canadian, even though I was quite Israeli, it opened up a lot of doors that were closed to me as an Israeli. For example, Jeff Seidel and Or Sameach and Torah. As an Israeli, there was, we'd never step into, or no one would ever reach out to you. But I did get a little exposed to both Jeff Seidel. I did a discovery seminar. I wrote myself after they make you write a letter to yourself when you finish the seminar, and then they mail it to you after 6 months. I promised myself I was really effective. I was never going to do this, and I was going to do that. And then once I got it, 6 months later, I was back in Montreal. I ripped the letter, didn't open it. But, I had a little bit back and forth learning and getting a little more interested. I went back to Montreal. I started putting little tefillin, learning with the Chabad rabbi a little, but nothing really clinched. Then after the army again had this sort of very cooling effect on me. And after the army, I went to England, again, to a very secular environment, until the murder, Rabin's murder, was something again that woke me up. So I got to get back home. The country's burning. It's going to be a big problem, big civil war. I got to get back. And I left England, came back after I finished my degree. But then the story goes that I had a back and forth to go to some shiurim here or there. I was warmish, but nothing really clinked. I never really went all the way to make any commitments as far as Yiddishkeit, Judaism. But then my grandfather passed away, and my father gave me his tefillin because he knew I had an interest in Yiddishkeit. And about 2 years after my grandfather passed away, after I read some Holocaust books on Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos, I felt very, this Holocaust stories make you feel very, overwhelmed, or I had to put on tefillin. I haven't put tefillin for a few years. I put on my grandfather's tefillin, Motzei Shabbos, said Kriyat Shema, and I decided I have to. I said I'm going to start keeping Shabbos. I'm going to start putting tefillin, and ended up that it was the day I made the decision to do this and that I put it in this tefillin on my grandfather was the yortzeit of my grandfather. I didn't even know. It was Yud Gimel Sivan. It was the yortzeit of my grandfather, Saba Yitzchak, and somehow something just happened, and it was a week after Shavuos, and which I happened to spend in I stayed up all night and this, and then a week later I put on tefillin, and I somehow had a clarity that I wanted to just, this is what I wanted, and I was going to start keeping Shabbos. Tefillin, I went to start yeshiva. I was working for the Knesset for Yuda Arel as a parliamentary assistant. I stopped working twice a week because the Knesset was off. I started learning in Aish. There was like some fellowships for students from Hebrew U, which I joined. Someone told me about. I got to know Rav Noach Weinberg, Rav Moti Berger. I fell in love with them and with Aish Torah, and I started learning twice a week. And then a few months later, I was offered a position in the Prime Minister's office, which was my dream. Netanyahu was there. It was 1997. Benjamin Netanyahu was the Prime Minister. Moshe Leon was the Mankal of the CEO of the Prime Minister's office. And this was my dream job. It was like I was 24, 25. And I knew, this is too good to be true. It's like an advisor to Prime Minister on poverty. And we set up this poverty agency in the Prime Minister's office. And I somehow was like, I knew that I was given this opportunity to make a decision. Like it was given, like somehow everything got fast forwarded. And I had to, I was given this chance just to show me, like, you can have it. It's this or this, you got to pick. I had like a very clear clarity that there's a decision to be made about which life do you want. You want this life or that life? And it was like really put to me, like, the platter to choose. And I chose, I left it. I joined Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal in Aish Torah. A year and a half after that, I had smicha from Rav Zalman Chema Goldberg. I was married. A year later, I had a kid. I was in Flatbush on Shlichus for Aish Torah, trying to start Sleeping Giant and Project Inspired.
Yeah, Project Inspire is about helping people in the broader religious community learn to be able to reach out beyond their own community confines and connect with people across the Jewish spectrum through various events and study together and holiday parties and things like that.
Yeah. So when I came to Aish Torah, I was very taken by your. No, I forgot to tell you from age. You didn't ask me. You didn't tell you. But from age 5, I had this other aspect to me. I was very idealistic. So I connected to Rav Noach very much. From age 5, I had this idea that I was going to change the world. I wanted to be a world economist, to save the children from hunger. I used to watch TV and the news and see all this Somalia and Cambodia, people starving. I decided I was going to work for the United Nations. I was going to save the kids from poverty in the world and hunger, and that's what I was going to do with my life. And that's what I studied also in McGill. I studied development economics and then London School of Economics. That's what I started Third World Economics. When I worked in the Knesset, it was also around the poverty bill, how to help. That was my specialty, and also the Prime Minister's office. So this thing about how, to change the world in a big way was like somehow I very much connected to Rav Noach's vision about how we're going to make the world a better place. So when someone like Rav Noach tells you, I need you, to help me in this revolution, and it's like, it's how can you say no? It's like this tremendous, huge person who's a giant in so many ways. Where are you going to find in the world today anyone who tells you, I really need you to help me make the world a better place, and really mean it and really invite you, and let you let him into his into his cabinet and to really fight
looking for the 10 good men, right? He was looking for his 10.
Right. 10 good men. But anyone, he's invited anybody. But yeah, he would prefer them to be men. But he really invited anybody who he met to join him in making the world holier, better.
I just finished reading the biography that came out by Jonathan Rosenblum of him, and I also owe a lot of gratitude to him because my parents actually met at his apartment many years ago. So I have a lot of personal gratitude there as well. So where did you go professionally? You had this background in sort of developmental economics, some psychological work in your background as well with the army and so forth. And you also had done some study and some outreach through Aish Torah. Where did your career take you?
So it started really within Aish. I did a few major projects that were the highlight of my work with Aish, and that some of them are continued afterwards. One of them was my first project with Aish was the Nachal Haredi. Rav Noach was actually, people might not know, maybe it is in the biography, I didn't read it, but I raised money from Rav Noach to start the first Nachal Haredi unit.
That was
$800.
your impetus.
I wasn't my idea, but I joined like the very first core of activists in the first, it was 1998, before it started. And I was, again, like if you remember my background, being come from the gymnasia, I was interested in Yiddishkeit, but I still had this very thing on Bacharedim, and that they should all go to the army, and there's no way. And if I'm going to be joining their ranks, we're going to have to deal with this problem first. So my first projects I was wanted to get off the ground was that we have to find a solution that whoever is not learning, whoever's why shouldn't they go to the army? And there was this someone was starting this initiative, so I was trying to help them, and I got Rav Noach to donate $8,000, $800 per head for 80 of the first kids to join, like to help recruit 80 kids, $100 a head to get kids off the street to go to the army for 80 kids. And also I got certain Rabbanim to go to the bases, the chief rabbi of the Rova and the Rabbanim to give them chizuk and to get involved. And so that was my first project. And my involvement with that the army and continued for many years as well, so that I'm still involved with certain legislations. And right now the new thing is how to work on, I did a campaign recently to raise awareness for even maybe finding a solution of giving a ptor for actually getting the Chaverim not to go to the army, and anyone who doesn't want to go to the army not to go to the army, because really the army doesn't need them anymore, and it's a bit of a farce. And there's been a lot of actually positive feedback. For example, the chief of staff Ehud Barak in his political party made it on his platform for the first time that he's also backing this thing that we should give the Chaverim and the Ptor in the army, etc. So that's one angle. Another thing was the television. I helped start Hidabrut and also got Rav Noach on television, and Rabbi Young Rice and Rabbi Wine on television. I helped Hidabrut get their license at the beginning of time, because when I came to Asia, I heard Rav Noach say, we got to reach out, we got to reach millions. And their biggest project was Project Discovery, which was hitting 30,000 people a year. I talked to Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Noach, you're talking big, but you got to close the gap. We're not going to, Discovery's not going to do it. And we got to think bigger. You got to go to the media, you got to go to television, you got to hit, really reach the masses. I said, we don't know television. We don't know what do you want from us and this and that. But somehow, I started with Rabbi Wine, then Rabbi Young Rice, and then he got convinced. I did with Rav Noach a TV show called Ask the Rabbi. We did 26 episodes. Then Aish got more into videos, not so much TV, but Rafael Shor started doing more films, etc. So Annie Dabrut took off. And one of my biggest regrets is I didn't manage to convince them that we should do like a TV channel. That was one of my things I was trying to lobby pretty strong in Aish.
How did you get connected to Hidabrut and how did you have the connections to get Aish on TV?
So originally there was like the way Hidabrut got on, the way I got on TV was there was a public service channel, like people in America they have PBS, something like that, which allows for public bodies to broadcast, which is sort of what it is. Like if you have, so it's sort of an open television. It's like sort of before this was before the major internet days, but beforehand, like you wanted to put anything on TV, you have to go through the major channels. Except there was something called the public service channel, which is a little more open, but still you need a license to go through it. You have to have an NGO, you got to get a license, you got to get approved, you got to go through the Minister of Communication, and they didn't know, and it was a bit complicated, bureaucratic to do it, because I was a little bit of the Knesset, I had a lot of connections. I managed to get through the bureaucracy, get myself a license, and then I helped get Hidabrut their first license to be a broadcasting unit inside this larger, until they got their own independent broadcast channel, which is what I failed to do with Aish. They didn't quite see where this was going to go. So, have
you stayed involved with the television side?
For a few years, but not so much lately. I still I worked a little with Channel 2. We did some public service announcements. My other major project after a while was a Shmir Salashon campaign, which was sort of based on Aish did one in America, Rabbi Yerwin Katzov, and I think Rabbi Feld, that words can heal, words can hurt. And they got a lot of media attention and a big coalition of both secular and even non-Jewish Jews to talk about the issue of gossip and to raise awareness as a doorway to teach people about the beauty of Shmir Salashon, the laws of speech and the laws of Ben Adam Lechavero, between man and his fellow, which is such a beautiful part of Yiddishkeit. And it was I brought it to Israel, so we did a campaign with cooperation with Ministry of Education and the TV channels. They got tremendous amounts of free airtime in most major channels, and we got about $2 million worth of free airtime for these PSAs. About with all the celebrities, we recruited about 30-40 celebrities, soccer players, singers, artists to speak about.
Who were some of the celebrities that did it?
I don't remember all the names offhand, but it's like singers, Pablo, a few, don't put me on the spot with this. But artists, actors, this was already back in 2006. It's a little past twice. I can send you the PSA, you can look yourself. But famous people in Israel, soccer players at the time, I don't remember all the names now. But it made quite a splash. That was my last TV project, but otherwise, TV. Whenever we did the public service announcements, also with my lobbying the last few years about the internet law. We're trying to get filtered internet as a default, so we did a lot of public service announcements using both free airtime from the elections that they give. We actually ran like a couple of times an election just to get awareness and free airtime. And also, just in general, we did something with the Ministry of Communication that did a public service announcements to tell parents that we lobbied for a bill that gives that forces the internet companies to give free filters and let people know about it. So we got a budget from the Ministry of Communications to do public service announcements telling parents that they have the right to get free filters and to awaken them to the need of it. They have this little kid who's sort of in his room watching whatever he's doing, and his mother knocks on the door, what would you like for supper? And then you see the kid is actually looking at some strip club in the computer, and she's like, he's all shaking and taken aback. Well, what did you say, mommy? And then a commercial goes, you never know where your kids are on the internet. Get your internet filtered for the generals. That was a big campaign. So TV, that was my experience with TV.
It's interesting, you've mentioned a number of major projects, each one of them kind of its own major, beast, so to speak. You talked about Nachal Haredi, or what's now known as Netzach Yehuda, which is the core for people from Haredi backgrounds or various more religious backgrounds to join the army in a way that's, I guess, safe and accommodating for them. Talked about Hidabrut, which is this major television station, and then broadcasting Jewish programming. And then you talk about the public service announcements and the Words Can Heal campaign around anti-gossip and helping people, speak more kindly. And then also these PSAs about internet. Do you think there's like a thread that connects all of those together? Because they're very different initiatives, but they're all very ambitious and they're all very, big ideas and really trying to plug certain holes in society. Is that the thread, or what kind of, you wouldn't naturally think the same person would be involved in all of those different types of projects?
Right. Good question. Good question. I only see two shifts that happened in my life as far as what I'm interested in. One was like until Rav Noach, which I was more interested in Tikkun Olam, more like on a physical gashmiut level. People are hungry, people are starving. It shouldn't be. Let's help them. And there must be some technical solution. Just figure out greater economic growth, better distribution of resources, better foreign aid, and making sure the money gets to the right place. That was stage one. Stage two has been more like realization that the world needs healing on a deeper moral, spiritual level. And everything since has sort of been around that theme that, we as both as individuals, as families, as societies, as nations, as the world, have a lot of potential that we're not fulfilling on a spiritual and moral level. And that if we were more, where we needed to be spiritually and morally, a lot of the problems of the world will be solved from that place, or from that higher place that we need to get to. And I buy into definitely this idea that as the Jewish people, that we have special both achrayas and opportunity and potential, and also strategically seems very reasonable, to try to focus on your people and what's around you to make a difference, and not to go too far off to conquer the entire universe. So, trying to raise the Jewish people to their spiritual potential on individual, family, community, national level. And there's many central problems. I think Ben Adam L'Chaver is a special one, knowing that Hashem is in the world, runs the world, created us, and wants what's good for us, and has a system that can really help us reach our potential as people and as families, as a nation. And there's certain issues that are really mekalkelim, that are really causing trouble for us as individuals and as a society that need to be taken care of. And so that's the very strong common thread. And sometimes there is a challenge of choosing where to put your focus. And I also, on a personal level, I like to be where no man walks. To be ahead of the pack. Like, where am I really needed? Where is there no one else is doing it? Where it wouldn't happen without me? Somehow have that desire to be ahead of the pack and go run in uncharted territories. And I have that gift that I don't see, where people don't see the possibility, the potential, or where they see the wall. I see how we can get through the wall and how we can get ahead of it, or behind it, around it, or break it. And so therefore I go for things that sometimes seems like either like impossible or not worth trying, or no one else is doing. That's what attracts me the most. So I guess that's what I choose. And
so speaking of walls, firewalls, filters, it's a cute little segue there. But the last initiative that you mentioned were these PSAs, very provocative about the need for filters and things like that. So obviously, I believe that's kind of where a lot of your attention is focused today, and much more broadly than that, even when you talk about internet addiction and porn addiction and all the very, very difficult and sensitive areas that you're dealing with now. So how did you get into that, and why the internet? Why did you see that as a threat? Why did you see it as something that you wanted to address and tackle, and that you were qualified to do that?
So I think I was chosen for that. I think Hashem chose me. God chose me for this mission. I wasn't really so much looking for it. I'll tell you a little bit of the background story, and you'll understand what I mean. I was working with Aish until about 2006. After Aish, I went back more. I stayed active in Kiruv, but I went back to more professionally to work more in the therapeutic world. I got more training. And I was working for an organization called Matan Rav Shlomo Yaakovzon, which helps Haredi kids at risk. It was a big government money, 40 million shekels a year. That was coalition money to help Haredi kids at risk. I had to go through the Ministry of Welfare and this NGO called Matan that hired me as a psychologist to help kids, Haredi kids at risk, to plan projects, to do project management and create projects with this funding in 21 cities in Israel where there's concentrations of Haredi youth at risk. And it was very interesting and challenging and amazing opportunity, and met amazing people and worked with so many people from the government and from the Rabbanim and etc. And I wouldn't say it was the main problem, but we kept coming up across and against this internet addiction, and beyond that, addiction, sexual addiction in some pockets of population. And we worked with the secular professional authorities, government authorities from the welfare department. They said, what do you mean? It says normal behavior. What do you guys leave the kids alone? What's it? But with the cultural sensitivity from the Haredim, it's definitely something that we felt that needed to be dealt with. So I searched for resources. The professional establishment wasn't going to provide any answers for helping or dealing with this, and I wasn't trained in it, and I didn't know too much about it. So I searched for resources, and I came across this organization called Guard Your Eyes on the internet website. I reached out to them, asked them, do you have any resources in Hebrew? And I called them up and started talking to the person on the other side. Ends up, he's in Israel. He's a Chassid, a Karlin Chassid from Beitar, and he's working out of his machsan, his basement, his garage, And I sounded very interesting. He was helping a lot of people. I saw it already on the website. Hundreds of people were being helped, and he had quite a lot of resources, but not in Hebrew. I said, maybe I can help you. Maybe I can translate something. I met him, and I saw there was such a potential, there's such a need for what he was doing, and he already had so much success with such little investment and such little know-how and such little professionalism. This was like, just a fellow doing this as a side something. He was a programmer. He was doing it on the side. He was helping already hundreds of people. He didn't have an infrastructure. He didn't have an organization. Didn't have anything. And I started helping him voluntarily for months until it's just, there's so much need for this organization. I just grew and grew and grew. So I started spending more time doing it. We started then, we flew to America. I said, okay, we got to take it to the next level. We made a strategic plan. We got a board. We got Askamas from the Yechezkel Torah. I went to make a presentation in the Catskills to the Yechezkel Torah of Torah Masorah, Aguda. We met with the OU. We met with Torah Masorah, Aguda, OU, who else, forget. And we created a website in Hebrew, in Yiddish, in Spanish, in French. We made it grow. We hired staff. And after a couple of years, I joined them full time. I left my work with Haredi Kids at Risk and started doing this full time. I got more training, did some more training with 12 steps. That's part of what we do, not all we do. And it's just been taking us, meaning it's just, it wasn't really a choice. It was like, it seemed like no one else was doing it. It's a very complex, sensitive issue to deal with, and that I seemed like I had what to give, I had what to help on many levels. It wasn't what I dreamed I would be doing at any time in my life, but it's just it seemed no one else was doing it, and somehow Hashem put me together with this fellow, and we've been working together about 12 years now, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Can you describe the challenge as you see it, and then in particular what Guard Your Eyes does to help combat that challenge?
Right. So the challenge is huge, and we're still trying to tackle and conquer it, and still a long ways to go. But the challenge is, there's many challenges. One of them is first of all, our target market mainly is the Jewish community. So we're looking at the challenge is that children, starting from the age of, let's say, early today, I won't say 7, 8, 9, 10, I would say the average maybe 13, 14, but the majority of kids are getting exposed to inappropriate material on the internet, to pornography. A lot of them are developing, I don't know what percentage to tell you exactly, but very significant percentages are developing syndromes that I wouldn't necessarily call them addiction, but at least most of them, everyone who gets exposed is developing syndromes of very strong guilt and shame, and it weakens them spiritually and emotionally and psychologically, because no one speaks to them. There's no normalization of what's going on. It's like, it's looked at, they know it's terrible, they know it's bad, and they feel terrible, they feel they're all alone. And this part of the challenge is, first of all, is to minimize the damage that they're causing themselves, and by their perception of themselves is so bad and guilty and shamed as what they're doing. And also to explain, some people, the kids don't know what the risks are, and that's one thing. Then we have a more serious problem, like more adult people that are really falling into addiction, that they want to stop and they can't, and there's many different levels, anywhere from just very light addictive behaviors are no big deal, just they need a little help, just like quitting smoking or getting on a better diet, and with very basic tools we can help them: urge management, making a plan, motivation, how to deal with falls, maintenance, relapse prevention, etc. And we're talking about tens and tens of thousands of people that are reaching out. We have 35,000 people signed up to us, and I don't think it's a drop in the bucket of what's really out there. I think it's 10 times more the people would want to reach out if they knew, and if they heard about it, and if they knew they could help them. And then there's the very hardcore addictions that really need much more help, which is it's either therapy or 12 steps or other types of recovery programs or rehabs. But that's a very small percentage. And for that, there are other resources. But because we're online, and because it's such people are embarrassed to reach out to a therapist or that, so we still have an opportunity to help thousands and thousands of people for example, it's not our main focus, but I would say over 2,000 people, for example, went through us to 12-step programs through GYE, not because that's our specialty, just because we could be a bridge for them to reach out anonymously first, not have to expose themselves. But the bulk of what we do, there's 35,000 people. The majority of them are just people just with a little support, a little guidance, a little chizuk. They can be helped not to fall deeper and to get to break free from addictive behaviors and to get back to feeling good about themselves. And sometimes just people need okay, it's no big deal. You had a little fall, get on with life. Don't make a big deal about it. It's normal, happens. We're living in a generation where the challenge is tremendous. Sometimes we have a percentage of people just sort of spiral down from shame and self-hatred and self-loathing. They criticize themselves too much and they just need a little push and little building their self-worth. But the majority of people are behavioral issues, and it's all the ages. Again, we're trying to create resources for teens and for adults, for men and women. And we also have another department that helps spouses. So sometimes the wives find out my husband has been doing it. They feel betrayed. They feel this, that. And we try to obviously prevent divorces and rehabilitate the trust and help the spouses, deal with that, and help the struggling spouse to deal with his addictive behaviors. So there's an endless amount of work. And then there's prevention, like you said, the whole filter aspect of it. If it's lobbying in the Knesset for filter laws, if it's trying to create solutions or teach people what's available, or it's endless. I mean, there's in that field there's more organizations, but even then we feel like there's a need. Like there's TAG in America that helps get filters, but they're only for people who come to their offices and have to do it their way. It's a little bit right wing for some people, and so we do feel that there's still a need that we could, but we're also trying. It's very hard. The challenge is to prioritize where we should put our efforts, because also we have different languages: Hebrew, English, Spanish, French, Yiddish. We have a big website, and we don't have enough resources to do everything and to do everything well. So really, the challenge is for us is to really try to focus on what we're most needed with, which we feel is giving the treatment to those who are falling. That's our main.
You mentioned the idea of it sounds like you promote a sort of an approach of normalization, whereby you help people understand that if they're falling to temptations, if they're struggling with viewing pornography online and the various things that come along with that they shouldn't feel, they shouldn't become stuck in shame and self-guilt and self-loathing, etc. How do you balance that with the fact that there are some very clear proscriptions, prohibitions from a Jewish perspective for somebody who's concerned about, following Jewish law and things like that against these behaviors and some of the things that come from these behaviors, and at the same time telling them, it's okay, don't feel so guilty, and so forth. How do you balance those two aspects?
First, before I answer that clearly, we do make the distinction. I mean, for some people who are highly addicted, the main focus is not the normalization, not because we don't feel like, not because we believe they should feel ashamed of themselves and terrible about themselves, just because that's not the main thing that's holding them back. It's not, but for some people who are usually they're addicted, the behaviors are not so extreme, or they're just falling here or there. For them, the main thing is the normalization, because besides, if it wasn't for the shame, or if it wasn't for the self-loathing, they wouldn't deteriorate. They were just, okay, fine, I had a fall 2 months ago, I had a fall 3 weeks ago, and I have a fall every 2-3 months. I have a little fall. For that kind of person, normalization is very important, because that exactly that self-loathing and that shame can cause them the deterioration. That's number one. So it's not for everybody. That's the main thing. It's always, we're not promoters of shame and for anybody, but for some cases, eliminating the shame is very crucial. For others, it's less crucial, but nothing good comes of shame usually anyway. But to answer your question, how do you balance the two things? We like to use the analogy of Lashon Hara. No one's going to belittle Lashon Hara. No one's going to say Lashon Hara is no big deal. We've got the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation doing amazing work. The Chafetz Chaim did amazing work. I think it's pretty much accepted in the Jewish world that Lashon Hara is a terrible thing. It's one of as maybe a worst or as chamor as the three chamuros. No one's going to belittle Lashon Hara. No one's going to say, oh, Lashon Hara is no big deal. Everyone does. And then on the other hand, when we do it, no one, feels, no one, but I would say the average guy doesn't have Yetzurei Matzpun. He doesn't have like a terrible conscience about, oh yeah, I spoke Lashon Hara yesterday. I can't believe it. How did that happen to me again? Oh, 3 weeks ago I spoke Lashon Hara. How am I going to look in the mirror? How can I go daven today? How can I put on tefillin? But a guy who falls in whatever he falls, which again, who's going to, if we have a Rav says, no, Lashon Hara is much more or less. I think they're both chamuros. They're both things that are Jewishly, halachically serious. But that's not, we can see very clearly that in some things we don't take that approach. And I think part of the reason that happens to people is because somehow something inborn in the sexual, that there's something shameful, very inborn about it, because it's something sexual, it's hidden. It feels like, like something's wrong with me more than, and also because no one knows what is going on with another person's life or another person's mind. That's the other reason. It's like, regardless of what it was, because it's so secret and no one would ever know. Lashon Hara is quite, I see everyone does it. No one's so careful. So I guess it's really no big deal. That's part of it. Not that it's not a big deal, but, that's the sort of like, no one's going to get.
Right, not to dwell on it and not to just be obsessed about it. Think, kind of put it into the category of other issues that people might have or other failings.
Those are the two things. Again, one of the answers wouldn't be enough. I think somehow the sexual thing does have a very, I don't know, on a Freudian level or other level. That's like, obviously a person is something deep about it, that reminds us of our animalistic sort of nature, which pretty much shows in our faces when someone might have urges, which is a little more obvious and more challenging than just having an urge to say something not the most positive about someone else. But even that, there's probably things, when a guy would, if you're a bit of a baltaiva with food, you wouldn't feel so guilty about that, even if you might overeat. So I think it's a combination of those two things. And probably third, there are, even though for Lashon Hara, there also is quite a bit of awareness and PR about the punishments and this and the other. But somehow I think also for this, there is quite a strong PR in like the holy books about the severity. But again, none of the answers by themselves explain the thing. I think maybe a combination of the three gives the clearer picture why. So to answer your question, the balance again, I think people already quite have we don't quite have the heaviness of. I agree with there needs to be a balance, but we don't feel that's exactly our achrayus. We feel like the right now the balance is a little too much towards for a lot of people towards the guilt, the shame, and the severity, and for those people, I think normalization of. Again, it's not necessarily, we're not normalizing, let's say, pornography. We can also make a distinction. For teens, let's say, we're not saying pornography is normal. I think
normalizing the struggle,
and be also even beyond that, even like even masturbation. If that's allowed to say the word here, but even.
On this podcast, it's permitted.
So I'm saying we make a distinction of masturbation and pornography. So pornography, we're not going to say, oh, it's normal, you fell. Again, we're not going to make the guy guilty and shamed even about that. It's not going to have so much. But there's a difference between, I think we do have a feeling that for teenagers to put up sort of like an expectation that's of zero tolerance, it's never going to happen, should never happen. For as far as masturbation, from what we understand, both from speaking to the Gedolim and speaking to different myths, and also from reading the holy books, it seems to be sort of an understanding that it's almost beyond every normal teenage ability to have a totally clean teenagehood without that. But
I was going to ask you because
young people zero tolerance for pornography, meaning that it is possible and it's not too hard.
Right. But when it comes to the something like masturbation, I was going to ask you because here we are, people are living in this hypersexualized society. And yet for a religious teenager, there is no permitted outlet for that sexual energy. And for that, first of all, that which is already natural and inborn, A, and B, that which is being fueled vigorously by a hypersexualized or exceedingly permissive society around them. Whereas in other cultures, they may have, either explicit access or just even the softer modes of outlets or expressions. What do you advise young people? Is the goal sort of a zero tolerance kind of thing? And or is they not that not even a reasonable expectation for them because they'll fail and then feel bad about themselves? Like, what do you tell a young person? It doesn't even have to be a 13-year-old; it could be a 20-year-old.
So it's exactly like lashon hara, meaning it's a very good parallel. You're not going to say, oh, lashon hara is very hard. We expect you to fall, and it's okay. Don't worry about it. Which is pretty much what you mean. You don't want. You're not saying that, and you wouldn't say that, and you don't want to say that because you don't need to say that. And the kid should understand that lashon hara is asur, and it's very hard to be super, 100% zero tolerance with lashon hara. You should try. You should aim for it. And you have to weigh your words very, very carefully, who you're speaking to and how's it going to be understood. You don't want to give a header. Oh, chances are you're going to fall. So, so don't drive yourself crazy and don't try too hard. And, why have such a hard time? You don't want to go all the way to say that, I don't think. But, you have to walk a fine line. But the message is, yes, there's no heter. We're not giving a heter. No one's going to give you a heter. No one's going to say, oh, it's too hard, so, it's mutter. Or it's too hard, therefore it's mutter to fall every once in a while. No one's saying that. It's asur. And, there's a lot of asur things that we're nechshel that if it's lying, if it's lashon hara, if it's lo tachmod, lo tikom, lo tito, it's lo tisne. There's many things we do on asvarim. You did it. You were mean to your sister. You were mean to your brother. You spoke lashon hara. You spoke rechilus. You stole. You this. Okay, you do. You try not to, and it's a good thing not to. And if the more you can, the better. And there's the higher madrega you can reach, adraba. But just know that it's a challenge, and and you should do your best. And if you have a fall, what happens to the best, and just get up and brush it off. And yes, it could lead to some sort of a weakening in like, oh, if they're so lenient on me, so I guess I'm just gonna not. There is that risk, but what alternative you have? You don't have. There's no magic solution or magic pill to help people with that. And the risks of shaming and making this, we see it very, very clearly in our work, how it backfires, how it creates more psychological, more emotional, more spiritual problems. And we definitely feel that that's not the solution, and that's not that's not where the success is going to come. So you have to walk the fine line, and we feel for a lot of teens, the normalization is very, very important. At the risk, at the end of the day, it could be. We feel overall you're going to be gaining much more healthier, stronger, more resilient teenagers by creating a more normal expectation and telling the truth about it. And also people are clueless. We find kids, don't know the difference between what's just a wet dream and what's actual masturbation, and to the extreme of even ridiculous stories, like if a fellow was, was masturbating during the day, so should have a wet dream at night because he thought that would be even worse, or he's even watch porn, so in order to should have, people, teenage kids, some of them are clueless, and telling them, first of all, what's mutter, what's asur, what the halacha is, clearly that wet dreams are not the same as this, and that you should try your best. And it's a challenge for a lot of people, and for most people, and for all kids, it's a challenge at some point, to some level, and you're totally normal. To normalize the feelings, to normalize the struggle, to normalize the attraction. And I think that's going to create a much more healthier teenager than just scaring him to death that, he's going to burn in hell if he just happens to him, or if it's going to happen again, and make sure it shouldn't happen.
So you mentioned 12 steps earlier, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that through popular media and other resource or other sources in the context of alcohol, drugs, maybe gambling, things of that nature. Can you speak to that a little bit more when it comes to sexual challenges or dysfunction even, and what role that might play in this particular arena? And because you mentioned specifically that maybe in hardcore, quote unquote, cases, or more heavily addicted types of cases, the 2,000 cases that you sort of passed on to higher levels of intervention through 12-step groups. Why would that relate to this particular situation, and how would it help people, and what would they gain from that they maybe wouldn't gain from the website that you have?
So first of all, they can get to it through our website, because we can help them figure out if it's for them or not, and also get them to get an evaluation and to help them get into it in the right way. So it's still, that's where they should come. And 15% or so of the people who come to our website are probably, candidates for that kind of program. And it's not like, our number one, choice of program, but it is very available, throughout the world. It's free and it's effective. There are probably other good therapies for heavy addicts, but it's definitely one of the alternatives that's easy to reach to and accessible. And in the Jewish community, it's become quite developed in this area. So for those 15%, it's pretty clear, when we talk about a heavy case, it could be, first of all, they're usually adults, because it's a program that for sure 18 and under, it's not even shayach, it's not appropriate. And even that, you probably need a more maturity, spiritual and emotional maturity to do a program. It's a little bit of it's not complicated, but it's spiritually, emotionally, it's a deep and heavy program. We found from our experience that 21 and under, it's not really, we're not going to send their kids. And also we're not going to send women there, most 99% of the time. And so, but the cases like people who've been to live they paid for sexual services on a regular basis, when their addiction has crossed past the screen and they're doing dangerous activities, infidelity, or paid sexual services, or to the extreme that we're talking about addiction, that's 5 hours a day in front of the computer, and already endangering either their lives or their families, or so in cases that are more extreme like that, we definitely encourage them to speak to one of our volunteers. We have volunteers that are specialized in seeing who's fit for them, and also trying to get them over the fears and the hesitations to try the program. And for them, we've seen hundreds or even thousands of success stories. People who feel they got their lives back through the program. It's an amazing program for whoever it's right. It's deep, it's spiritual, it's effective. It changes people's lives in a very meaningful way, and it gives them freedom from usually addictions that they've been carrying for many, many years. It's not just something that shows up one day and then they end up in 12-step. We're talking about people being either many years or even decades involved in that kind of sexual addictive behaviors, and they find a way to get freedom. It's
what happens in the 12-step environment that allows them to find that freedom, in particular that they couldn't find just with the online resources?
So a few things. First of all, it's the group support, meaning it's people with the same struggle that really care about you, and that they're here to support you, and that you can reach out to in real time. The addictive behaviors, like, when a person is all alone in front of his drug of choice, whatever it is, it's stronger than him. That's what, how they define addiction. There's no one definition of addiction, but that's one way to see addiction, is just, it's something that's stronger than you. No matter how much will you bring to it, whenever it overcomes you, a person just can't say no. And when they have someone they can reach out in real time, either by phone or they come to a meeting, and they, instead of running to their drug, and that's what these groups are built and trained and sort of like socialized to do, to be there for the person, like sort of 24/7. It's not like a therapist you go see once a week, and if you're a real node, you call them every day. It's like they're really there. You have a sponsor that's with you. You can call them whenever you want. You have in your phone, they give you 30 friends from your home group that you can call anytime, and they're encouraged to call them whenever there's an urge comes. They encourage them to call their friends, 4 or 5 friends every time they have an urge. So they train them to break that addictive cycle, that addictive behavior, by, instead of going to the drug, to lean or reach out for help from the group. That's number one. Number two, the coming out of the shame and the self-hatred and the being all alone for many, many, many years, which weighs on them and just feeds the addiction even more, because like the guilt and the shame just feeds doing it again and again and again, feeling emptier, feeling more depressed, feeling more inadequate, feeling more unworthy. And here they see people like themselves, like, so I'm not alone, I'm not the only crazy guy. And they see that usually it's normal, nice people, and also they feel the acceptance from the group. The group makes them feel loved, accepted. They don't judge them for what they do, which anywhere else they would be judged. If they went into a room and said, "Hi, my name is this, and I'm a sexaholic," good luck to you. No one's going to clap hands for you. But if you go to one of these 12-step groups, that's what they get. They get a clap of hands. I'm clean 2-3 days, he says. I'm clean a year. I'm clean 2 years or 10 years. and whatever they say, they get clapped, and they get a lot of love from the group and support. And being able to shed that secret from them and share with other people in real life and not be on a screen. We have that in Guardians to a certain degree also. We have forums, we have phone conferences, and people can do that, but there's nothing like doing it live in a group where they see you and they hear you and you expose your weakness and your history and your face to other people who are struggling with the same thing. It's a very therapeutic process for these addicts. And they work through it. They have different techniques. They work on their connection with God and they're letting go when something comes, and developing really faith in Hashem that He can take him through this, and a lot of beautiful principles and ideas.
I was going to ask you about the spiritual piece, because I know a lot of 12-step programs are built, by definition, a 12-step program is built around spirituality and embracing a higher power and things like that. In this case, it seems like a lot of the challenges that people are coming here with are sometimes a result of spiritual issues, right, or spiritual restrictions, right? I can't do these things, look at these things, act in these ways. And yet at the same time, a 12-step group is going to encourage a spiritual solution to those very things. How does that kind of coalesce?
Right. So it is true that let's say for a religious Jew, he might come to, his behavior is being judged as inappropriate more by religious standards than by, let's say, universal standards. But at the end of the day, it's what fuels both the addiction and the psychological challenge and problem is the fact that the person sees what he's doing as something that he doesn't want to do. So it doesn't matter for what reasons he thinks that he shouldn't be doing it. I assume a guy who eats too much mayo, even if he downs half a jar of mayo a day, you're not going to find him in a 12-step group. You might find him in a
Mayonnaise Anonymous.
Right? But why? Because, it might be not healthy. He might not be able to stop eating it. And it might cause him heart problems, and he might end up in doctors' offices. But the chances are he's not going to develop too much around that, guilt, shame, this. And he's probably not going to end up eating a jar a day, and then 2 jars a day, and then 3 jars a day. Even though there could be something addictive about, I don't know, the sodium, the salt, I don't know what else. Also chocolate, you have chocolate addiction, but it's not so easy to fall into chocolate addiction. But this thing, it's both addictive on a universal level, physiological, dopamine. Pornography, they say, releases more dopamine than hard drugs, seriously. So it has the potential to become more addictive on a universal, psychological, physical, medical level. And combined with that, it is true that, that as a religious Jew, a person feels guilty about it and bad about it. So there is that adds the extra layer of problem to the issue, which is whoever does something, if the problem wasn't eating mayo, but I don't know, some other thing that most people think would be a disgusting action that he would be very embarrassed to do in public, it probably would have a more potential to become addictive. I'm so terrible, I do this and no one knows, and what if people found out? It has this, as we said before, a negative downward spiral that the guilt fuels the addiction, the addictive behavior, and you feel less well-being, you feel more problematic, and you feel more problematic, you feel more you needed to escape to something. But even if it stayed just at that level, the guy does it once a week. In the secular world, people say, hey, that's not addiction, that's nothing. What's the problem? Once a week, that's totally normal. A normal kid does it 10 times a week. Why you only do it once a week? Again, chances are, if in secular terms, universal terms, the behavior would not be considered any problem. Chances are it's not something that warrants a 12-step program, but it's not an absolute, because at the end of the day, if a person can't stop and the damage that he feels both emotionally or spiritually or in his life is quite heavy. So there is, I'm not an advocate of 12 steps for everybody at all, and I'm very careful who we recommend 12 steps for. But the fact that a person, for whatever reasons, feels that what he's doing is harmful and he wants to stop, but he can't. I don't know how important it is, what level it is, or who's judging what it is that he's doing to be so important. If something, could be that it shows that the problem may be somewhere else. Could be some sort of perfectionism.
And in those cases, you feel that there's a spiritual solution to that.
No, so again, you asked me a question that, it had two sides, so I answered you to one side. As far as how do you solve, so in most cases, it's not a spiritual problem, meaning it's not like, oh, he's a religious guy, and if he wasn't a religious guy, everything would be fine and dandy, and if the Torah didn't say you're not allowed, then he just wouldn't be anywhere near it. The guys who are like that don't end up in 12 steps, because they could, some of them doing something that gets worse, but guys like that don't usually end up in 12 steps, and we try that they don't end up, because the guy whose behavior is not so extreme that according to secular or universal standard, it would say, oh, if it wasn't just for the religious aspect, there's nothing wrong here with the guy, chances are he's not going to end up in 12 steps. So if that's your question, but even for a guy who's somewhat, the challenge is that it's very mixed in for a Jew. It's both universally and psychologically clearly something here is not right and addictive in behavior, and also it has the aspect on top of that it makes it worse that it's really asur, and the Torah says it's a terrible thing, and I feel even worse, not just just an average disgusting person. I'm also an evil person who does things that the Torah says I shouldn't be doing, and yes, it makes it heavier and more problematic, and the impact emotionally and spiritually is greater. But to answer your question, so how can the spiritual solution doesn't say you shouldn't be doing this. The spiritual solution focuses on the abstinence that the 12 steps recommends or espouses is not from a spiritual or religious point of view. It comes from, listen, you have an illness, and the more you feed it, if you have an allergy, they call it an allergy. If you feed your allergy, you eat peanuts, you're going to get a rush. Just don't eat it. Don't consume your alcohol. Don't consume your pornography. If you do, you won't be able to stop. So it's not from that aspect, they're not addressed as a religious thing. Oh, you shouldn't do it anymore. They do have this thing that don't do it anymore. The moment you're in the program, zero tolerance. But it's not for religious reasons. They look at it as that's the medical aspect of the program. It's like, you have an allergy, you have sickness, you have an illness, you're taking the stuff, it makes you crazy, it makes you not be able to stop, you want more, don't do it. The spiritual part comes in the solution, not in the definition of the problem. The definition of the problem, they don't address it on a spiritual level. On a spiritual solution, so they say, this thing is bigger than you. You're ill. There's no way out of this. This is something that's, deep inside you. There's no way out. Not necessarily agree, but that's how they view it. And only a greater power, only connecting to the Almighty God, the King of the universe that has all the powers. He can do anything. And if you attach yourself to Him and and you do His will in your life in all aspects on a true deep level, He'll help you conquer this problem. Like He'll help you conquer any problem in life. Just have bitachon in Him. You won't die if you don't take pornography, and Hashem will watch you and help you. And once day at a time, Hashem will be with you. And if you trust that and you internalize and you work on that, it definitely, you can imagine, has the power to help us and change us in life if that's your focus. And that's the big part of the program. And it works, obviously. Dr. Tursky says, what's the difference? Why is the Musar Shir doesn't work? How could it be this 12 steps programs works? And he says the difference is because when you go to Musar Shir, when you come out, no one tells you, and you don't believe that, if I don't listen to them, I'm dead. If I don't do this, what the Rav said, I'm finished. But in 12 steps, they help the person internalize, like you use again, you're dead. You don't listen to us, you're finished. And some of these people I've seen, I don't know if necessarily death, but they've seen like pretty deep places that they don't want to get back to. And they see how some people end up where they end up. So it's more real to them that, if they don't follow the program, they're, finished. So it's like when you have that kind of a mindset and you listen, you follow the program, then the program works. And if you follow the Musar program to that same extent, it probably also works. So that's the spiritual solution of the 12-step programs, to my understanding.
In closing, can you just share one or two stories of people who have been helped, been uplifted, been transformed through this work? Maybe they were in a very, very dark place and, their lives were restored, their families were restored, obviously without breaking confidences, but just the structure of the stories that you may have witnessed.
Okay, nothing dramatic came to mind except one. So, the non-dramatic stories are really hundreds and thousands of them of men who've been, living double lives. I'll tell you the non-dramatic, and I'll tell you one more dramatic, but it's the non-dramatic are still, I think, quite dramatic when you get to know them. It's, people that that been living double lives and feeling like they're the only one, and it usually starts at an early age, either from teens. Our average user in GYE is probably about 32, 33, 34, and married with kids. So it's like, they've been carrying it probably usually since age 13, 14. Haven't spoke about it to anybody. They feel like, it's weighing on them. Usually very, the guys who come to us, they're the guys who care, the Yirah Shamayim. They could be, really working on themselves, but somehow this thing they can't kick off, they can't finish, they can't get over. It's quite addictive, and it's quite, hard to find the way out of it. It's easy to fall back, and once people fall back, it's easy to like, okay, what's the point of trying? So that's your average guy, and your average solution is that he comes in, he finds out he's not the only crazy one, he's not alone, and no one's judging him, and he's got some tools, and he's got some way to, reignite his commitment that he probably tried 1,000 times already, but it's like, this time I'm going to try again. And this time he has some more, science-based solutions that can help him, if it's making a plan, and if it's working a little more on getting clear why he wants to stop, and shedding off some of the shame, and figuring out how to deal with his impulses and urges when they come, and giving a few techniques. And also once these falls, it gets the Yechezkel. We have this 90-day program that, you track your progress, and if you had a fall, like automatically you get Yechezkel and says, just get up, no big deal. You have a forum that a lot of people, they post their struggles, and they read other people's H's. They're not alone. They get to be best friends with people that, from all over the world, sharing in one place. That you can have a partner and sponsor program where you sign up and you're in touch with someone, you speak to them on a daily or weekly basis. You join a phone conference. And a few months later, after that, they start to really see real hope that, they might have had a fall here and there, but it's not like, something new that they never experienced, like a new freedom. Like they have air in their lungs, they have hope, they have, they have a few weeks of clean, without having falls. And a couple of years later, they feel like, they don't live a double life anymore. They tell their wives, or they don't, depending on when and what and the other, but they're, this thing is arm's length away. They've been there, they've done that, and they know it's not a struggle for them anymore, and they live happily ever after, and have, other normal struggles as we all do, and go on with life. That's your average story. And they're very grateful, and they, some of them come and tell their stories, and you could read about it in the forum, hundreds and thousands of stories like that. A dramatic story right now, comes to mind 2 stories. One quite similar, strangely. One story is that my partner saved a girl from suicide in some city in the world. Youngish girl, was about 17, 18, and reached out to us through our hotline anonymously, and she had issues and psychological issues as well. A lot of the girls who come to us, come with backgrounds of sexual abuse or deeper problems, usually coupled with addiction. For girls, it's higher percentages. And she reached out, and somehow we managed to. She did get into a 12-step program, and we sent an ambulance that saved her life, I think even once or even twice. And then a couple years later, after she being in a program, she's married, and she's helping other people. She's a sponsor. She's a mentor for other girls, and she's still youngish, 22, 23, and turned her life around in a very serious way. A similar story happened in Israel. I had to actually drive to also a city here. Similar situation. I don't think it was a real suicide attempt. The other one was a real suicide attempt. We really saved her. This one was I don't know if it was just more of a threat, suicide threat. And also we got her to a rehab in Ritorno, and she became a volunteer. And she was a single mother. She raised a kid, and she's got a job, and she's also helped a lot of girls, and she's also involved with support through our organization. Yeah, I know. I'm sure there's more if I thought about it, but that's what's coming to mind.
We've gone for a long time, so why don't you let people know where can they learn more about this, and what can they expect if they check out the website guardyoureyes.org?
Yeah, both. guardyoureyes.com will do. Again, we have resources and help for all the different levels of struggle. And also, people who are not struggling, we have something called the GYE Boost. That you can sign on to the website. I think it's gyeboost.org. Yeah, gyeboost.org. or .com, either one. Both of them work. And you can sign up for Chizuk. That's for the general populations. We have Rabbanim and GYBoost.com. We have daily Chizuk, WhatsApp, and email about this topic so people just to stay strong. Everyone needs a little bit of Chizuk. Rabbanim from across the spectrum that make special messages for us or that we find in different places with permission. That's one. And then the main website, guardyoureyes.com, we have resources for all the different levels of struggle, from teenage struggles to heavy struggles to just someone who's falling occasionally and just needs a little bit of chizuk and a bit of tools how to get a little stronger, and all the way to any addiction at any level that has to do with pornography or sexual addiction. For both men, women. Also, we have support for the spouses. We have a whole network of support, forum, phone conference, a hotline. If a wife is dealing with a husband that she needs help with, we're there for that. We have obviously volunteers and staff. For women, we have women, and for men, we have men, and for different ages. And we have a Yiddish website if someone wants in Hebrew, gye.org.il. Everything can be accessed from the main website. And we have we're putting out materials for teens and for parents, how to deal with the struggle. In Hebrew, we already have published materials. In English, we're in the process of just finalizing some drafts that we'll be publicizing to help how to guide teenagers. We find there's a lot of need for that. And we're creating, in Hebrew, we have a teenage site. In English, we're about to launch a teenage site specialized for them. But right now, we do have resources on our website for teens. So anyone who's educators, therapists, parents, and with someone to struggle, feel free to join. It's free. Everything is free. We are supported by donations, both of members and people who like our work, but there's no charge. It's anonymous. There's no way to know who you are if you sign up. We'd love to help anyone who needs help.
Amazing. Yechezkel Stelzer, Guard Your Eyes, among many other incredible pursuits that he has undertaken in his life and will continue to, God willing, for many years to come. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ari. Pleasure.
This has been Ari Koretsky on Jews You Should Know. Please visit us at JewsYouShouldKnow.com and subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume podcasts. Find us on social media at Jews You Should Know. If you'd like to become a supporter of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate that, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Jews You Should Know. Finally, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review so that we can continue to grow and introduce many more people to Jews You Should Know.